Hello and welcome to the 117th episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when you're losing. I am Kellen, joined today by my friends, Mark and Neelan.
Hello. Hello.
The orange tank, the green tank, and the best tank. Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we'll be continuing our What I Love and What I Hate series that Mark did a poor job of hyping up last time, with our focus today on deck building. Deck building is a interesting and fairly modern mechanism, at least in the context of what we'll be talking about, and so we're excited to sort of talk about the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
Lukewarms.
A quick shout out before we get into the games that we have been playing this week. Board Game Geek has put out the call for nominations for the Golden Geek Awards, which is where you can nominate your favorite games of the year, your favorite expansions, your favorite board game apps.
Get to good stuff.
And your favorite board game podcast.
There you go. Who would you nominate, Kellen?
So we don't do this often, but we really are asking for your support and your help to nominate the Board Game Barrage podcast for this award. Really does help spread the word of the podcast. And honestly, you might be shocked. Board Game Barrage is well known in certain pockets of the country and the internet, but it's definitely not super well known on Board Game Geek.
Right.
So everyone's vote will help us.
Yes, every vote will definitely matter. As Kellen was saying, you guys hear us all the time, and we love you for that. That's wonderful, and we love putting this out. But I think in the grand scheme of podcasts and media entities in the board game world, we're sort of like a scrappy little engine that could. So we need your coal to make that engine run. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I mean, I think the one thing that we do have going for us is like the love and support that we see on the Discord has been incredible. And I would love if you guys could channel some of that in this direction. It would be a
Super
huge,
cool. Yeah.
huge boon to us.
So you can do that we set up a redirect, boardgamebarrage.com/vote, and that'll get you right to the page on Board Game Geek where you can vote for us for the best board game podcast of 2019. If you need help with that, please email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com or reach out on the Discord, on Twitter, on Facebook. Voting is only open for about a week, so it isn't something, that we're going to be bugging you about every week, but it definitely would mean the world to us. Mark and I have been in the board game space for more than 10 years, I think, at this point. And honestly, looking at the Golden Geek list is something that we've talked about hoping to be on that list one day.
Yes.
And so even being nominated would really be a treat.
That would be unbelievable, yeah. Yeah, so as Kellen was saying, this is only going to be open for a week and a half. So, as much as you love listening to us, go ahead and pause this recording. Go to boardgamebarrage.com/vote. Just click Board Game Barrage and then get back to us.
We'll wait.
Yes.
Thank you so much for voting for Board Game Barrage. All right, so let us get on with it. Let us get on to the games that we have been playing. This is obviously an odd time, so some of the games that we have been playing, we actually played in the past. Stay safe out there. So let us start. Mark, what have you been playing?
We have all been playing. So Neelan's going to say it the right way.
Well, it depends on how we want to do this. So
Neelan is going to say it the right way.
Bruxelles.
Okay. I'm going to say it Bruxelles. Anybody who wants to look it up?
Completely the wrong way.
Brunswick.
So Bruxelles 1897, which is French for Brussels or
Brussels,
something?
yeah.
Okay. But if you want to look it up, you look up Bruxelles, like you look up Troyes. So this is the card game version of Bruxelles 1893, which is like a fully fledged board game. There's a lot going on in this little box of cards. As an aside, Kellen has pulled out the Visit Brussels pamphlet that comes in every copy of Bruxelles 1897.
Is this German? What language is this written in?
Be Belgian.
Yeah.
Because it's not English.
Right.
There is some English anecdotes, but I'm going,
not enough, though.
How am I going to read this on air and bug people?
Well, read it anyway.
Do your best.
Read the French or the Brussels. Or the Belgian.
Art Nouveau, Musée Horta, les musées Horta est établi dans la maison personnelle et l'atelier de l'architecte Victor Horta. Oh, I had him in the game.
Yeah.
Mr. Victor Horta.
You sound like Victor Horta.
Yeah, I think he gets people out of prison.
That's right. That matches up perfectly. So what you're trying to do in Brussels 1897, as I said, there's a lot of things going on. It's sort of a multi-use area control. What else we got going on? Set collection. A lot of disparate sort of aspects of the game. The way it sort of works is that there is a grid made up of cards, sort of worker placement spots. These spots correspond to different set of actions that you can do. Some allow you to pick up pieces of art. Some allow you to get building components to build buildings. And so you are placing cards, which are your workers, on these spots on the board. When you select a spot, you take the card from the spot and you replace it with your worker. There is an area majority aspect that corresponds to winning rows of this grid, which allow you to move up different tracks. One track allows you to score more points for your buildings. One track allows you to unlock more of these characters you can pick up.
It's this weird combination, right? Because you may have the perfect action you want to do, but it's in a stupid row.
Right.
And it's in a row that you don't care about or that you've not committed to. And so there's actually multiple types of area control or majorities happening, which is those rows. But in addition, it's the 4 cards around you that make a shield.
Right.
And that also is a different type of majority. It's how many cards you have in that majority.
Right.
So you're constantly sort of saying, well, what action would actually be best to do right now? What's available? What Mark and Neelan, what are they going to do?
Right.
Because everything that you have in front of you is public information. And then how does that combo, right, with the tracks that you've already committed to and with the resources that you already have?
Right. Exactly.
But the other thing that's interesting, right, is that so not only are you placing that action card that Mark has called a worker, there's no representation of a worker, so I'm not sure.
Is it
It's an action card.
But you're placing architects onto them.
Oh, wait. So your action cards are going to jail? Or are your workers going to jail?
I don't know. Anyway,
Okay.
as you pick an action card to place for that action, but you have to choose which side of the card you want to use. One is a lower dollar amount, one is a higher dollar amount. So you're actually deciding how much to pay. And you might ask yourself, well, why would you ever pay more money, you dummy? And that's because that corresponds with the area majority. And so you may actually overpay for a space to ensure that you're going to get it. So what you're thinking about is like very tightly interwoven and linked, which I think is making it hard for us to explain it to you.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah.
And that is why it was so hard when I taught you how to play it. And it's not because I'm the dummy.
So what did you guys think of Brussels 1897?
I think the nature of your conflicting interests in the game, where you sort of have to consider like your placement of a card, like Kellen said, you might have a card that is absolutely the one thing you need to get first, but then you see it's in the column that doesn't mean anything to you, and that hurts a little because obviously you want to sort of combine your interests where possible. If you can place a card on an action that's both good for you and in a good position, that's awesome. There's also kind of a tempo to the card play because of the way that the Brussels actions happen, which get more and more expensive, so you might want to go there earlier. There's a lot of these really tight considerations, and when someone beats you to the punch on them, it just feels very constricting and very harsh. You can't do everything you want to do in a game that doesn't even last that long. There's 4 rounds of this, and that's not enough to do everything you want to do.
I also like the tempo consideration in the row majorities because there's only 3 spots per row. So if you place and somebody else places, then it becomes like, am I going to place again to lock it down, or is somebody else going to jump in? So there's a lot of tempo consideration.
Totally. Yeah. Because what that means is that you might commit to a row cheaply early on and get beaten out by it, or go in heavy to guarantee that you, in case it doesn't get back around to you, to like double down on it. Yeah, there's a lot of very interesting, very hard decisions in this that I thought was pretty compelling, but I don't know, something about the nature of this being a small box card game and that sort of complexity to it didn't really work for me. I don't know. It was hard to gauge.
So none of us have played the 1893 version of this, Brunswick 1893, but I do believe that in some sense this game is a triumph of minimalization, which is that this box is small and we could make it half the size of even the current box. And so just with a simple deck of cards, you are doing a lot in this game. Now, I have a preference for a Chudiak style multi-use cards. And what this game does is it just has like 7 or 8 different decks of cards that you do have to do a little bit of finicky, annoying upkeep where you're shuffling, 4 cards from 5 different piles and then dealing out half of them, and you're redoing that over and over and over again. But in terms of making a game with a low cost point, with a lot of decisions in a very small box, I'm shocked, honestly, and think that if you were looking for something that you could travel with that has some more depth to it, like it's here. It's certainly here. With that said, I don't know why it didn't go off for me in the way that I was super excited about it. I think that it suffers a little bit at the 3-player count from the idea that as long as no one pursues the same path as you, you're kind of okay.
Right.
Neelan and I fought a little bit more than Mark did over the buildings. And so that left Mark a little bit alone to focus on getting the shield bonuses, which was one of the types of area majority. Yeah. And so that meant that Neelan and I were a little bit more constrained for resources and fighting. Mark was a little bit less constrained. Ultimately, Mark won the game. I can't say for certain, obviously, whether that was what did it, but I always hate it when your decision of which path to go down in a 3-player game, 2 people go down that same path, and then the other person is just like running away with it.
Do you think that this is better at 2? Because I think at 4 it's a little too chaotic, probably. Although with 4 it's a larger grid. So
I think it would make for a very interesting 2-player game.
Yeah, I think so. I think probably prefer it at 2 to 4. I think it's really interesting how interlocking this is. This feels like Lacerda light, like people who are like the Lacerda interlocking aspect where one thing connects to another. It's a much different game, but if that sort of gears on gears aspect of gaming appeals to you, maybe Bruxelles 1897 is the way to go. Bruxelles with an X.
Brunswick. Another game that we have gotten to try is been on my shelf of shame for multiple years.
You can check out Kellen's Shelf of Shame video exclusively on Patreon. So he made a little
tease.
Yeah, a little tease for Kellen's video.
So we got to try Elysium. This has been on my shelf, but I've seen it one too many times on Board Game Geek lists of hidden, underrated gems of things that I just need to check out. And so what Elysium is it is a Roman themed? Is that what an Elysium is, Neelan?
Greek.
God.
No.
Not the
Karen would be Roman.
Mythic Greece.
Is it?
That's what
Greece.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
In a game of Elysium, you are picking, before the game starts, 5 of the 8 suits of colors to be used in the game.
Oh, wait. You and Neelan play this, but is this the one that has the 4 colors that you like? You
yes.
choose? Oh, I have played this game. I don't remember a thing about it, but I've definitely played it.
Great. This is perfect. That's going to be very helpful for us here. So, in a game of Elysium, it uses a very interesting way to draft cards, which is all the cards are put out. So on the card, it looks like it's a cost, but it's actually not. It's just a requirement to pick up the card. But each turn, you must discard one of those pillars. You're basically making 2 decisions. Which card can I get? And then what pillar am I discarding? And it's very interactive in the sense that if I discard my red one, that is giving Neelan free reign for the rest of the red cards for the whole round. And that's such a weird thing to wrap your head around. That's the first thing that's interesting, is that this is a drafting game that feels unlike anything else from that perspective. You are drafting these cards into what is called your domain, if I recall correctly. It's another one of those games that has stupid trigger words that are annoying. But in your domain, you can use the cards for their powers. But in order to score them, you must get them into your Elysium, which is below your board. And so a lot of the game is about the tempo of when to convert those combos that you have, when to push them, through the veil into the Elysium. I think they die. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's probably right. They're like ascending.
They become like legends. There's a liar, somehow they level up. But what's cool about the game is that you only use 5 of 8 families of cards, and each family has a different subsystem in some cases that is injected into the game. So one might be more about competing for majorities with your neighbors. One might be more about interacting and smashing other players and making them lose money. And so whether those cards are in or not in the game really will change how the game plays. This has beautiful artwork. Ancient Greece.
I do remember.
As we just discussed. Oh, good. You remembered something.
I can help.
Neelan, want to help me out here?
So, yeah, I think the things that I enjoyed about Elysium particularly are there's this element of trying to sort of build up a powerful combination of powers in your domain at the start of the game. And then, like you said, finding the right time to convert those into points, because you have very limited opportunities to do this throughout the game. I think it's something like, on average, you get 2 transfers per round in a 5-round game. Is that right? So it's kind of like you're only going to be able to move roughly about 10 or so cards down to the bottom there, but you're potentially accumulating a lot of them on your top row. So some of them might be exclusively to get the powers, and then you sort of have to decide the right time to move them down. And the reason that becomes such an important decision is because there are also these scoring tokens that you're competing over. So if I'm the first person to get 2 purple cards into my Elysium, then I get a chunk of points. And that's pretty significant in the overall scoring. So it might be that I might want to forego a card's power in order to be able to score off it as maximally as possible, but at the cost of being able to use that power for the remainder of the game. And some of those powers are quite good. Like some of them are just literally giving you an extra transfer every round, giving you extra victory points every single round. So there is this timing consideration is crucial to the whole thing. I liked the mix of powers in the game. I liked the way that the different families seem to mix up the variety in the game. I was curious. We were skimming through like some of the families that we hadn't played with, and there were a bunch of just interesting mechanics that had nothing to do with what we had been doing prior, like whole new boards and stuff like that. I liked the promise of that a lot. Like if you were to roll this up, for a second time, it would probably be a completely different experience.
Yeah, I will be keeping this.
Ooh, it makes 100, right?
Yes, so this game has made the 100 cut because I want to see how it plays at 2 players. And one of the things I loved so much is, like Nealon alluded to, those bonuses for being the first player to get a family of 2 down into the Elysium is so many points, is so many victory points that you really start planning around it from the beginning of the turn. And there were a couple turns where someone would grab the card that allowed them to transfer the right amount of family members, but then someone else would see a combo that actually allowed them to break the process of the game and transfer someone down to kill them into the Elysium prior to, sort of the sacrificial killing phase. And that made it so that they would win that bonus. And so there were a lot of like pointing at someone and going like, gotcha. Right. But it didn't come from, a whizzle-wazzle draw of just randomness. It came from analyzing the combos that were available, looking at how it could combo with what you already had, and making a play. So there were fun plays to be had. Altogether, though, I don't know that it gels yet for me, like some of my favorite games do. But I am excited to do it again, see what it feels like at 2 players. It is a bear to set up and put away because you're picking 5 of 8 or 9 and then shuffling all those cards together, which...
not nothing.
That's not nothing, unless you play it online. And then Tabletop Simulator does it for you.
There you go.
You filthy pirates. So that is Elysium, or as the French say, Elysium. Nealon, what have you been up to, sir, in quarantine?
Well, yeah.
The loneliest of lonely. The robot among robots.
Totally. So I think this
Can't have children in quarantine.
Totally. I tried. I've been trying to visit my children, and it's been very hard to get out of the house. But no, this leads pretty strongly into what I've been playing, because by virtue of the fact that I have been stuck in the apartment alone, it's obviously limited my options to play any board game. So what I have are solo games, which, crying out loud, I don't actually play all that often, but I'm now forced to, and online games. So I'll start with a couple of things I've been doing solo. I broke out Coffee Roaster, which we haven't spoken about for a long time.
Have you played the app version of this?
No, I actually don't think I knew there was an app version of it.
Yeah,
oh, that's awesome. I also saw that the new Z-Man version is doing the rounds right now.
Okay.
But I don't know if the art is substantially different.
Green, and it has sort of a siren on it.
That's the app?
Yeah.
Huh, okay. Well, I'm going to look at that, because Coffee Roaster is a great game. So yeah, if you pick this up...
joke. You dummy.
So whether you're going to be playing this in board game form or in the app form, Coffee Roast is a great... there it is. Mark showing it to me right now.
It exists.
Yeah, this would be a great one I'd recommend. So I've also been playing the Cosmos adventure games. So these are not specifically solo games. They're designed for 1 to 4 players, but they're intended to replicate point-and-click adventure video games. So the idea is you're in a location where you have some sort of goal that's sort of given to you through the story. I've only played the first chapter of this. There are 3 that are in each box of this. So I'm going to come back to this, I think, when I finish it up, but it's pretty intriguing so far. Otherwise, we've also been playing Hansa Teutonica online, and this is actually the first time I played it with the 2 of you. That game was a bit of a weird one because Kellen
did so good.
We left Kellen unchecked.
Yeah. But
you can't do that. That's dangerous.
And it was Christina's first game of Hansa Teutonica.
True.
She really liked it.
Good.
Yeah, the things that you guys have spoken about this at length before, but Hansa Teutonica is, as someone that is pretty new to the game, I've now only played it twice, I'm loving the variety of options that you have available. Like what looks to be like a area control route building game, that's only one small part of it. There are so many different things that you can compete on for scoring. It's pretty compelling.
I loved it. I love playing it.
I want to set the record straight.
There it is. Lay down the law.
At one point, we're on voice chat, as we do, so that we can catcall each other. And I called Mark.
Wait, did you? Oh, yeah. That's right. You did say that. I do remember that.
And I called Mark.
Right.
I said, Mark, you're making a move. And Mark was making a move because for the second turn in a row, he was going to waste his entire turn stopping me. And because of the lag and the static and, sort of Mark had the worst microphone I've ever heard of all time. We were joking that he was in a submarine while we were playing. I was trying to convey that Mark was being a little because he wasn't making Neelan or Christina share the burden of attacking me. But he interpreted it as me being
right.
Because I was just complaining or QQing
right.
about getting attacked over and over again. But what I was trying to say is that Mark was being because you were just using your turn to stop them, but that was only helping Neelan, who was in second place
right.
and potentially could win it. And I wondered why you weren't, sending out the SOS signal from your submarine to those guys.
Okay, can I tell you why I'm not?
Well, I mean, this is just me setting the
because if I tell people like, hey, you need to help me block Kellen, guess what I hear from Kellen? Why are you telling them how to play?
What are you talking about? That's not true.
You'd be like, that's a thing to say or something. I don't know. That's exactly why I didn't tell him. I was trying to draw them to help me stop you.
I was shocked.
And if
the tactics that you tried to use.
I think it was the clearly correct tactic. You ended up winning. I was trying to do anything I could to slow you down. I was hoping I'd get aid from my cohorts.
Yeah, but you didn't get aid. You didn't call to arms.
If I call to arms, you are going to crush me for it.
Verbally?
Yes.
What do you mean more than calling?
If I say, hey guys, maybe we should. Yeah, it would be even worse than that. If I said, hey guys, I need help blocking Kellen here. Oh my God, I would not hear the end of it. Give me a break. And that's Hot Teutonica by Andre Stedding.
I almost called you afterward because I was so incredulous. I was not saying don't block me.
Right.
I was saying, why aren't you sharing this burden? Because if you just let Neelan do it,
I agree
Neelan
with you.
doesn't help you,
yes,
then all you're doing is king making.
100%. How do I get to that?
You scream from the submarine.
No, you would get even more mad.
No.
Yes.
No.
Oh my God, don't even. No way. You are totally incorrect.
I almost called you.
I mean, I think that would have been a good call to make because I was.
I was annoyed.
No.
I truly, I was like, I almost called you because I felt like I was misunderstood, in the moment, and I was being too aggressive. But I was also it was something about the verbal. I was sort of like,
this is probably not even worth it. But
no. For the it's not worth it for the podcast. The reason I'm serious, I'm 100% serious.
Yeah.
I'm not joking.
Yeah. But what do I do there? Because my intention was to get them to help me.
I thought that you would take the first turn, right? And I was like, oh, that sucks. And then he'd be like, okay, guys, we have to share the burden.
If I say that, uttering that, I think is going to
make me more mad.
Yes.
Maybe. No, but literally after...
It will make you mad in the exact same way that I made you mad by doing it myself, but only amplified.
After you backed down, literally in the moment,
right.
I wanted to pause the game and have this conversation.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I did at least think to myself,
right,
and I told Christina at the time that I would have been less mad with a call for everyone to do it. Whether that's true or not,
right.
I believe you that it actually could be worse.
And you
if it became a 3v1.
Maybe if I had done it, you would be less mad. But my perception of the situation is if I explicitly say we need to do this, you'd be more mad.
It's sort of like if you had 1 point, and you were out of it.
Yeah.
But still knew that you needed to stop me.
Right.
And Neelan was within 6 and 7 points at one point. So it was sort of like if you were just taking your turns to block, you could just ruin someone's game.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, why isn't this being a distributed burden like normal?
Right. And that's what I was hoping for. My goal was okay, I'm probably out, but I have a chance. If I make this block and Neelan helps block, then Neelan slows down a little bit. Kellen is slowed down, and then maybe I have an avenue now to get something.
Yeah. No, yeah. I understand why you would feel that I would just get more mad.
Right.
I get that.
Right.
But
yeah.
Anyway, we can move on.
Perfect. No, it's great.
No. But I'm serious. This is outside the game because I felt bad. Serious. I felt bad afterward.
Yeah, I felt bad as well. But bad in a good way. I mean, bad in the way that we get feisty at each other. It's like the brother, the anger of the brother.
All right, I'll take brothers. I can take that to the bank.
There you go.
So those are the games we play. Now the real game.
You followed that up.
Yeah.
Man.
We will. I don't even know how to transition from that. But we then went into Can't Stop, which is another game you can play for free online at boardgamearena.com. And this was the first time I had played it before. You guys have both played this before, right? Yep. A fair bit?
A Sid Saxon classic.
That's right.
Yeah. So Can't Stop is basically a race game. So you have 11 columns that correspond to all the different combinations of 2 dice. And on your turn, you roll 4 dice, and you choose a way to divide them into 2 pairs. There are 3 different ways you can split these 4 dice, and each of those splits is going to give you 2 numbers, which are the 2 tracks that you then move up on. So when it's your turn, that means you're going to put these 2 neutral markers onto those tracks, and then you can choose to either stop there or go again. If you stop there, you swap the neutral markers out for your color markers, and you pass the dice to the next player. But you can have a maximum of 3 neutral markers out in your turn. So if at any point you roll a combination of dice that you cannot move one of those 3 markers up, or you don't have a marker to put onto the board, you're bust. And any progress you gain during that turn is lost. So it's a push your luck game. It's a game about sort of choosing the most optimal tracks to move up on versus how far you think you can progress on those tracks. Because the paths that are the most probable to be rolled, the 7, for example, which is the most likely combination in a pair of dice, has a lot more spots on it before it gets to the top of the track, versus the 2 and the 12, which are easier to move up on in terms of smaller distance, but harder to roll. Once you have 3 of your colored markers at the top of all of the tracks, you've won the game. So it's purely about how far you think you can get on your turn versus whether you're willing to forgo that chance to give someone else a chance to catch up. I love this. This is great for how simple it is.
Yeah, this is like a pure push your luck game that I like better than Ink and Gold, because it doesn't really have the runaway leader thing that Ink and Gold can do. And if you are playing with people who know how to play, you can get through a game of Can't Stop in 5 minutes. Electronically 5 minutes. I think it's a little more cumbersome when you're playing with the actual physical pieces, but it goes really, really fast, which I love. It's like push your luck, push your luck, push your luck, roll, bust.
I think this got us feeling like we were playing an in-person board game more than any other game we've played online to date. And it's a bad interface at Board Game Arena, but it's just because of the elation, and you don't even have to necessarily pay attention because someone is about to shout a curse word. I couldn't remember how to say that. I think it's so good because you always have sort of your go-to strategy, and in the game, it feels possible that you could win in 1 turn. It kind of feels like the odds, and the 7 track is the biggest track. And I think in one of the games, I got all the way to the top of the 7 track in 1 turn.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of sort of like you're drafting because you put one in the 6 or the 7, which is the most likely to happen. And then you only need 2 points on the 2 track. And so you're kind of going 2 and 7. And you're like, I'm going to roll for a half an hour. Yeah. And then I'm definitely going to get this.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to be really mad at me. I immediately always start thinking about rethemes for this game. I'm at Mario Kart right now or Mario Party. If you have a good retheme of this, I'd love to hear about it. I do think playing it online loses a little bit of the roll the dice charm because everyone would be looking at the results and in this way it just pops up on the screen. There's not even an animation.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did want to ask is if you thought there was any value. There are some, compare it to cribbage, okay, where part of the game is parsing the hands that you have and deciding what combos you have to add up to whatever number you're trying to get cards to add up to in cribbage. Have you played
I don't know
cribbage?
cribbage, no.
Isn't this
South African?
In Can't Stop, you roll the 4 dice, and on Board Game Arena, it just tells you the 3 combinations of that. It says advance on 7 and 8, advance on 7 and 7, advance on 8 and 1.
Not 1, probably. Probably not 1.
Well, that math doesn't work. But do you feel like there's anything lost there, or that is not something that people have to parse at all? Because I actually remember playing it in person and kind of moving the dice around and going, okay, it's 7, it's 8. It's not a hard
calculation.
Well, I mean, I did just mess it up, but do you think there's anything there, anything lost there?
I think what is lost is the physicality of rolling a dice, but I think what is gained in the electronic version is the quick calculation. It is like you can bang out a game of Can't Stop in 5 minutes.
It reminds me of in Rumble Nation, in Rumble Nation where you roll 3 dice. 2 of them choose the area, and then 1 of them chooses...
The quantity.
Yeah, and there have been turns where I just missed one of my options because I didn't put the combos together in my mind, right? And so I don't think it loses anything. I think it's purely, like, that's not really what the game is, but I just think it's interesting commenting on the differences between that digital adaptation and playing it in person.
Right.
Yeah, I think what is lost is kind of just like the feeling of the role and getting what you're looking for, right? That obviously isn't there, but I don't know. I think I would find just the iteration of working through all the combinations more irritating, I would think, in the physical version. But I'd be curious to try it just to like compare it.
Can't Stop, Sid Saxon. Great
R.I.P.
man. Yeah, well, that's sad.
Do you want me to close that instead? That was Can't Stop.
Moving on to the illustrious what I love and what I hate about deck building.
Illustrious.
Yeah, it's our long-running special.
Deck building is a mechanism that has been popularized and perhaps created based on who you talk to by Donald Vaccarino of the Dominion game and game system. In deck building, similar to card games like Magic the Gathering or the Pokemon TCG, you build a deck of cards before you play Magic the Gathering, and then you fight with them. You do a card battler game. In a deck building game, you actually build that deck during the course of the game. So traditionally, you start with a small amount of cards in your deck, you shuffle them all up, you draw a certain amount, and then you use those cards to acquire new cards for your deck, and then you run the deck through X amount of times, and that is deck building. And then someone wins the game. Many games have built on deck building, and Dominion is what you would consider perhaps a pure deck building game, and then now they're taking deck building as a mechanism, adding it to fighty games like Forbidden Stars. They're taking deck building and adding it to area control games like Tyrants of the Underdark. They're taking it to push your luck type games and adding it to Clank. So it's a deck building game with a big push your luck board element. Dominion was a preeminent mechanism of 2009, 2010, similar to you're seeing right now with things like roll and writes. Everybody was talking about deck building. So here we are in 2020. We are going to be talking about what we love and what we hate about deck building games. Mark? That's the ceremonial.
That's the call to action.
What do you love about deck building games?
What I love about deck building games is that you feel like you're getting stronger and stronger as the game goes by, because you are often getting rid of cards that you don't like. You are adding stronger cards to your deck, and I love the sense of progression that deck builders give me. A good example of this is a game that's been around for a long time and has a pretty good digital implementation that I've been trying recently, which is Star Realms. Star Realms is actually also fairly pure deck builder. There's not a lot going on besides the deck building and the fighting your opponent. And in Star Realms, you are adding planets to your deck, to your army. You're adding better ships. You know, at the start of the game, you've just got this like puny fleet and no planets to speak of and no bases. And at the end of a game of Star Realms, you've got this incredible armada and you're causing tens of points of damage and you're acquiring all these new ships, and just there's the sense of getting stronger and that curve that...
And you almost feel that way even if you're losing for the most cases,
yes,
deck
that's
builders,
true.
Because everyone is adding cards to your deck.
Yeah.
Or you're always adding cards to your deck almost the whole time.
Yeah, you're adding cards to your deck. Everybody's thinning out the bad cards. So yeah, there's that. Even if you're losing, you feel like you are building up. So that's always been the thing that I love the most about deck building.
Yeah, I think the thing that ties into it, which is pretty specific to what I like, is specifically like unique customization. So even if you're not necessarily seeing numbers go bigger and bigger, you're getting more honed in one specific part that other people may not be. Like in a game of Dominion, your bank of cards is pretty diverse, and you typically want to sort of go down a narrow subset of those cards to optimize your strategy. What I like about this is when you start extending this to the games that have deck building as part of the mechanisms of the game. For example, in something like Clank, mechanisms. In something like Clank, you have the opportunity to be the person that's just accumulating a lot of gold, and gold in Clank is victory points, or the person that just moves extremely fast and they can just zip in and out of the dungeon. So that it gives you very specific paths to go down, which are based around the way that you've tailor-made your deck. Like you have an array of cards available to you, and you'd be like, oh, this is going to work very well in this speed deck I'm building, so I'll grab that and add to it.
Yeah, I have that written down here as your flavor is determined by you.
Yeah.
there are people and we can continue with the Dominion example. There are people who build very self-contained decks that don't interact with other people's decks. So they're all about drawing cards and buying more cards. And then there are other people like my little sister who only buy the pirate ship card, which is designed to just screw with all the other players. And so there's this sense that, well, one player is going for the witch card, so everything's going to change. And so what you are interested in doing in any individual game will change. And that flavor that you build by the end of the game is sort of predicated upon what you want to do in the game.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love the most about deck building is the replayability factor. I think that leans into what Neelan has just said. An example of this is a recent game we played, Sorcerer City by Druid City Games. So this is a little bit different than a traditional deck builder, but you're playing a real-time game from a stack of tiles that you're buying, and then you're flipping those tiles over one at a time, just like you kind of do in a deck builder, and then having to determine what to do. But in Sorcerer City, you could be the guy that's only focused on victory points at the end of the game, like Mark did when we played the game. And his version of real-time tile placement with those cards became completely different than Neelan and I, who were focused on figuring out how to score the combos that were available based on how many you went up in a certain category. And so one player could get really good at fighting the monsters, that specific game, or go really, really far in the blue category, which is sort of the wild category. And so in that way, the game has a built-in replayability that's quite different than the replayability that we were sort of speaking about with a game like Elysium, where it's a subset of the cards. That just changes the flavor of the game.
Of the whole game, yeah.
But somehow this allows you to make a choice near the beginning of the game that you can then do it in 15 different ways, it feels like.
More about your specific experience rather than the experience that the game gives.
Yeah, and I think that deck builders, it does depend on the deck builder, how good a job they do of encouraging that type of replayability. But I think that in general, that is something that deck builders are very good at.
That sort of leans into what I hate about deck builders, which is, as Kellen mentioned, it has become a quite popular mechanism to put into games. And I think a lot of times they feel samey or they feel like uninspired. I feel like one of the mechanisms that I've played the most and sort of felt the most meh about are deck builders. I feel like whenever I hear about a new deck builder coming out, I start at a sort of apprehensive mindset. Like, what is this going to do that is going to make me want to play it more than other deck builders that I already like?
It's very interesting because there is sort of the Dominion style of how you buy cards, which is that all cards are available to you from the beginning of the game, and you see those 10 Kingdom cards and you choose. Or there's what we colloquially call the Ascension style of deck building, where there is a mixed set of cards and then 5 of them or 4 of them come out. And I think it speaks volumes to the fact that we haven't evolved that far past this, that we still refer to how you buy cards as either the Dominion style or the Ascension style.
Right.
And those were both very, very early deck builders.
Right, yeah. So, for example, a game that I played recently, Vikings Gone Wild, is a deck builder that does have the Dominion style, the cards already on the table, so you know what you can buy. A lot of glitz, a lot of chrome to the game, but in the end, there wasn't really much that I was offering that was interesting, and felt like a lot of deck builders nowadays feel to me just sort of, okay, fine, I've sort of seen it, but not going to be something I want to revisit.
One of the things I find frustrating about deck builds, and this is one that's sort of hard to gauge a little bit because it's not something I necessarily that bugs me while I'm playing them, but one of the things that's hard to escape about a deck builder is they are more luck reliant than people generally give them credit for, is that you are pretty burdened by early opening hands. Even when you have a powerful deck, you sort of have to hope that those combinations are coming up with a frequency that is befitting the deck. I mean, someone argued that the genre is about optimizing your deck to mitigate that, but there is still a reliance on good card drawer. This gets exacerbated by the market row games that Kellen was describing, where the perfect card for your deck might just pop up in the row because someone chose to buy a card. I found that happens more often than not in some games I really, really like. Something like Eternal Chronicles of the Throne, for example. You are typically building a deck that optimizes off certain colors, and you might get the perfect card that fits the theme of your deck just because someone bought a card from the market row. And then you snatch that up, and it's great for you. And then if that card comes into play with enough frequency, then you're probably going to have a great run with it. I think that it's a problem with the genre that is endemic and hard to avoid, but I don't know if it's enough to sort of neuter my love for the genre, but it's certainly something that when you get those bad plays or those bad runs where nothing seems to come together despite your deck, then that hurts a little bit.
This is not the hot question, but sort of an impromptu. Would you say that if a game looks interesting to you and then you find out that it contains deck building, does that make you more or less excited to check it out in 2020?
I would say, on the whole, less.
I don't know. I'm pretty neutral on it, I would say. Like, I feel like there was a point in time where I would have said, yeah, give me every game that had deck building as a mechanic in it, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It's just another mechanic for me now. It feels like something that's either used well or isn't, and it depends on the game.
I would say it's still a positive for me.
Yeah.
How does that affect that? Because there are games that are primarily deck builders, and then there are games that are deck builders plus X.
Yeah.
How does that affect your answer?
So if a game is primarily deck builder, I'm even less inclined to get excited about it.
And I think I would agree with that. I think pure deck builders sort of have a bigger burden to get past for me.
And do you have some examples of deck builders that you feel that are primarily other types of games that still do a good job of having a deck building element?
Yes, I would say one of my favorites would be sort of Great Western Trail.
Yeah, that was going to be my example as well.
Yeah. So deck building is a small part of it, but I really like the way it's integrated into the game. It sort of feels unique. You're trying to, by the end of your run, by the end of your circuit, get the perfect deck in hand, and you're only working with just a few cards, so it's not a very big aspect of the game, but it's just done in what felt to me like a fresh way.
I think the thing that makes that work especially well is because the balance of decisions you have along the route is, do I have time to optimize this hand? Like, how many times can I sort of recycle the cards in order to get the perfect hand? And that's a combination of both the deck you've built and how many stops along the way you're willing to take.
Right.
An example I have is A Study in Emerald 2nd Edition, one of my favorite games of all time, has deck building in it, but it's not the main mechanism. And I'm unsure of the weighting that I would prefer because it almost feels incidental in A Study in Emerald. Like, it doesn't feel core to the design of what you're doing, which is trying to suss out who is or who isn't on your team. But the deck building does lend itself to how good you are at fighting Mr. Cthulhu, like what you can do on the board. And so it's there, but it doesn't feel prominent. And so it's interesting trying to figure out what the perfect prominence is for a deck builder.
How's your excitement for a game turn out when you find out that deck building is the primary part of it?
Probably more excited if it's the primary and less excited if it's integrated.
Okay.
But that's just because I feel like it's done less well. I'm always looking for something to beat Dominion, right? But what I dislike about area control games, or what I hate...
deck building games.
What I hate about deck building games, thank you, Mr. Nealon, is what's fun isn't always what wins. So this manifests itself in Dominion hard. It also manifests itself in all the Eternal-like games or the Star Realm-like games. Even in games like Quest for El Dorado, the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia's deck-building game, where a card comes out or a card comes up, and you're like, oh man, that's the dragon. He does 17 damage, fire damage. Oh wait, I have a water deck. Oh shit. Like, all you want is the dragon, right? Because that's fun. In Dominion, this manifests itself like there are 10 different kingdom cards, and I want all the cool combos. I'm going to put them all in my deck, and then you find out that half of the game is just buying money cards and victory point cards because that arc is actually better statistically speaking. So there's Nealon at your ear bugging you going, statistically speaking, you don't want to take those cool cards, Kellen. I find that to happen more often than I would like in deck building games. And so I'm always wary of that and hope that the balance has been struck between letting you have some fun decisions. And I think that also is sort of a halfway of saying that once you're halfway through the game, like, you don't really have more decisions beyond running your deck. Like, you just run the deck. Like, the game is the the first 10 turns, let's say. Yeah. And that's not always the case. And I'd love to hear deck builders that buck these trends. If you're interested in sharing those with us, you can do that on our Discord or at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. So we have arrived at my hot question.
Hot question.
What is, well, I guess usually it's either or. And then I try to make it like a moral thing about like saving children. But what is your favorite archetypal deck building card? Neelan.
Mine's kind of a boring answer. Like, I love the draw 2 cards option whenever possible. Like, having an expanded hand of cards is kind of always feels like a strong play.
Yeah, you're that guy who in Dominion is like, we're all taking like 5-second turns and you're like, draw 2, draw 2, draw 2, and then you have to shuffle your deck again.
Exactly.
And draw it again.
Well, actually, that person is Dan.
That person is Dan.
Yeah. Who in our group is notorious for having turns in Dominion that just last 5 minutes long.
I guess my favorite type of card is like that big boomer, like the red dragon, like you're talking about, and like
the fire dragon.
And I like to like, you know, as you said, if you aim to get the big fire dragon, you're often probably going to lose. But I like being like right on the outskirts where like maybe I could get the fire dragon and then like getting the resources to get the fire dragon and then banging the fire dragon out. So I like the big attacky or the big like damage dealers, you know, maybe not focusing on getting them, but I like having the opportunity to get them.
I am a chapel boy. That is, I am a trasher. I love trashing cards. I love thinning my deck. Dominion, you start with 10 cards. If I can get that down to 6 cards, I'm in heaven. The idea that like I can draw every card in my deck, I'm just like, my God, like we just need this game to keep going because I'm going to get down to 5 cards and I'm going to win. Every turn I'm buying victory points. I always am drawn to trashing cards. I'm always thinning my deck. Kellen the Chapel Boy. So why don't we close this out with a round of recos? If deck building is something that you are into or not into, please share what you like. But we're going to go around the table and just say a deck builder that we would recommend that you pick up in 2020.
I would have 2 really quick ones. The first one is, we mentioned briefly Quest for El Dorado. I think as a game that is just that little step up from a deck builder, it's still very appropriate as a family game. You can teach almost anyone that doesn't know board games how to play this game, and I still have fun with this every single time I play it. The purity of it being a race game, the first person to get to the end wins, but with deck building as its primary mechanism is, I think, perfect. The other one I'm going to throw in, because we haven't spoken about it yet, is Aeon's End. This is a cooperative deck builder game where you cooperatively compete against various bosses that you have to...
bring up a co-op game in a Kellen episode.
I'm gonna.
You know the rule.
I have. And no, but it's great because like these bosses all have like different unique strategies. You sort of have to learn to overcome them. And it's a little bit like it's trying to replicate MMO bosses. So you sort of have this big bad and you're sort of trying to learn how to play it. And every time you attempt it, you get better and better at figuring out exactly what you need to do to beat it. It's great.
Doesn't Aeon's End, and it was going to be on my list as well, doesn't Aeon's End fix the problem you're talking about in terms of randomness?
It does, actually. That's a good point. Yeah, I should have mentioned that when I was talking about this, because what Aeon's End
I was planning on blasting it out at you. Like
at that time? Yeah, it's funny, because even though I had that on my list, I didn't put the two together. But yeah, no, so what is pretty unique to Aeon's End? I don't think I know any other deck builders that do this.
There are a couple, but I think Aeon's End is like the most prominent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you discard cards, you choose the order that they go into your discard pile, and then instead of shuffling your deck when you run out, you just flip the discard over. So the idea that your deck has been randomly sorted isn't a factor anymore. You're prescribing the order for future turns, which I think is pretty cool.
You know what's more of a race deck builder than Quest for El Dorado? No. It is a deck builder that isn't even a deck builder. It's a bag builder, and it's racing on a racetrack. This is, for me, the criminally underrated Automobiles. I think Automobiles is one of the best deck/bag builders around that you hear nothing about. You're on a racetrack, as the name may sort of hint at. It evokes that racing feeling. As we sort of been talking about, you get better and better. You're seeing your car whip around the track faster and faster. So it's that visceral, like you're trying to get to the checkered flag, and I just love that about the game. And the way that you can have a bunch of different powers in the game just makes every game feel fresh. I just think it's a very much under the radar deck builder that you don't hear too much about.
I have a couple, but I will say that I still believe in general in 2020, if you want to check out deck building, you should buy Dominion. and you should play it for a while and then add an expansion. There's like 17 of them. I don't know which expansion to buy because I have not played 17 of them, but there is one called Menagerie, so I would recommend you start there. If you want to get weirder, if you want to get a little different, 2 deck builders I'd like to highlight. I always love to give a shout out to Small Box Games. Their most recent, The North, is a game that Mark and I have played, and it has a really interesting idea from a deck building perspective, which is that you are building your deck, but in addition, you shuffle your deck, your discard pile, and your hand every single turn, and then you draw 3 cards. So most games you shuffle through and cycle through that whole deck, but this is more about just increasing your odds of getting certain types of cards because you aren't making that cohesive deck that maybe hits on 1 and 2 and 3. This may lead to less strategic depth than Neelan's. Neelan is tryharding and wanting you to count every single card like an Aeon's End, but the North feels unlike anything else, has spectacular art, and is very cheap and supports a small publisher. Another one that you can look forward to, I believe, this year is a remake of SPQF. SPQF is a game picked up by Letter Games and is being republished this year as Fort. They are taking what was a kind of obscure deck building game and fleshing it out a little bit and making the iconography better, which is great. It's one of the deck builders that I've had the most fun with that feels different from Dominion. In a way, it combines some elements of games like Glory to Rome with a little bit with some pools going on and how you combine cards together. So I've even heard it described on Board Game Geek as Glory to Rome and a deck builder having a baby. It's a fun game. It's an interesting game. I will definitely be picking up Fort when it comes out. If you want to look for that now, it's SPQF. I don't know what that acronym stands for.
One other game, I'm in a Friedman Friese kick, so I would be remiss not to mention Friday, which is a good game nowadays because it's a solo game, and also it's got a nice digital implementation. It's also a very pure deck builder, sort of a like in the vein of, although not like at all, it's not similar to Dominion, but in the vein of Dominion and Star Realms, it's a very pure, fast deck builder you can play over and over again really quickly. So that's Friday.
Something I'm very excited for is Eternal Chronicles of the Throne is getting a digital implementation very, very soon. And
separate from the CCG digital implementation?
Totally. So yeah, the Chronicles of the Throne is a deck building card game version of a digital game called Eternal, and it is now coming full circle to be its own digital game. But I think that would be, for me, the perfect way to play it, just with more frequency, because it's hard for me to get 2-player games to the table. And if I can play it online, more the better.
And there's an expansion for Eternal coming.
There is. I believe it's already out.
Why we don't have it?
Because I don't play Eternal Chronicles of the Throne nearly enough, sadly.
Spend your money. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can find us all over the internet, boardgamebarrage.com, Facebook, Twitter. You can find our Board Game Geek Guild, where we are talking about board games. You can find our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. We are having a special birthday celebration for Mark this weekend.
Woohoo!
So if you listen to this before Saturday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, at 4 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be playing games from 4 to 7 p.m. I've been trying to think. I want to do like Wavelength. I found the PowerPoint presentation version of Wavelength with like macros and stuff where you present your screen.
That's cool.
So we're going to go right to corporate America, baby.
Nice.
I'm going to project PowerPoint and play Wavelength. But we'll be doing Tabletop Simulator, Board Game Arena, all the online implementations you could want. You could beat Neelan at Can't Stop. You could beat me at Trois. I probably won't play Trois with you on Saturday.
Be careful when you play against Cal and Hansa Teutonica. That's all I'll say.
So please do join us if you're around. That will be centralized in our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Thank you so much to Heart Society for letting us use their song What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens.
All right. We know that you didn't pause earlier on when we asked you to pause and go to boardgamebarrage.com/vote. That's all right. I know you want to listen to the episode, but now, for real, as soon as this podcast is over, go to boardgamebarrage.com/vote and vote us for the Golden Geek Award.
You know, a lot of our recent reviews have been citing Christina as their favorite host of the podcast. So if you don't want to do it for the three of us, vote for Board Game Barrage for Christina the Blue Tank.
I'm making this promise. If we make it into the finalists of the Board Game Geek podcast Golden Geek Awards, Christina will be on the episode. As a representative, I can I can make that promise.
So long.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I am Kellen, joined today by my friends Mark and Neelan.
Hello.
Hello.
The orange tank, the green tank, and the best tank.
God, I hope this dramatic pause is worth it.
No, I've got nothing. I was like, literally, what's my next sentence?
I think the nature of the conflicting the nature of the conflicting. What the was I going to say?
So that is Elysium. Is there a way to mispronounce that?
You should say Elysium.
Put a couple of X's in there.
It's the X joke.
No.
What? That's perfect. Are you serious?
Elysium?
Yes.
What? That doesn't
That's
even...
the joke.
Who would say that? Callan Allen would say that?
Or
What,
as
do you
the
think I'm
French
an
say,
idiot?
or as the French say, Elysium. It's perfect.
As the French say, Elysium?
It's like a through line joke. Oh my God. I have to teach you comedy now?
But this joke only works if you assume I'm an idiot.
Well, that's a going assumption.
No, I think as soon as you say...
Nobody thinks that you actually think it's pronounced Elysium.
Especially if you say as the French say.
As the French? Because that's not even... This is not
Belgians,
French.
as the Belgians say.
As the Belgians say, Elysium. Done.
Well,
You
do we
gonna
need to
edit
laugh?
that? What do you mean? It's not.
Wait.
It's not in context. It's not in situ.
You need to laugh. You need to laugh. We need to laugh for you to tell the audience that was funny because they're going to assume you weren't funny.
You should put it like a Seinfeld,
Laugh track.
like a Seinfeld, like clearly like an iconic laugh track.
Bro,
and then
that's funny.
in the background, you could hear like Jerry's like some line from Jerry. Like it's so badly
That's
edited
funny.
that you catch up.
That's funny.